Hello, everyone, and welcome to our video series from the Nurse Leader Coach. We're really pleased that you're here today. I'm Rose Sherman, and I am the Nurse Leader Coach, and I will be your coach and guide through this series. Just a little bit of information about me. I have close to 4 decades of experience as both a nurse educator and also as a professor of nursing. And some of you may actually recognize me as the editor-in-chief of Nurse Leader, which is the official journal of the American Organization of Nurse Leaders. For the past 11 years, I've also written a blog, Emerging RN Leader, and we have about 5,000 frontline leaders that follow that blog. In addition to my leadership experience, I'm also a Gallup certified coach, and I've coached hundreds of nurse leaders over the past 4 years. I present workshops to leaders nationally. So the content of these programs is really built around frequently asked questions and information and concerns that leaders have. Now, we're really excited about this series, and we hope that you will be as well. So a little bit about the series. There are 10 programs in the series, and they don't need to be watched in direct order, but I would recommend that you watch program 1 and 2, Why Become a Nurse Leader, which you're currently watching, and then the next one would be Coaching Basics. Watch those two. Each program is approximately 20 to 30 minutes in length, and we'll end with some follow-up activities that you can do in your own setting to help you practice what you've learned. Now you're watching program 1, Why Become a Nurse Leader. In program 2, we'll be talking about coaching basics. Program 3, we'll be looking at coaching in times of chaos and crisis. Now, I am filming this series during the COVID-19 pandemic. So many nurse leaders are asking questions about how do we effectively coach staff to kind of reduce their anxiety and stress levels during this very challenging time. So that will be program 3. Program 4, we will be looking at coaching in conflict situations. And it's been my experience that most nurse leaders find conflict to be extremely challenging. And maybe you find that in your own practice as well. And then in program 5, we'll be looking at how can you use coaching to really promote resiliency. And program 6, we'll be looking at difficult personalities. How do we coach them? Program 7 is about staff who are disengaged. How can you potentially re-engage them through coaching? In program 8, we'll be looking at coaching through times of change. Now, program 9 will focus on coaching our newest generation of nurse leaders, Generation Z. And in our last program, we'll look at how can we use coaching to really eliminate bullying and incivility. In this program, we'll be looking at why even become a nurse coach leader. And we really have 3 goals for the program. Our first goal is that you'll really understand the business case for nurse leader coaching. You know, what's in it for you, because that's important as a leader, and also what's in it for your organization. The second goal is that you will begin to understand how you can make the shift from your current leadership practice to being more coach-like in the way that you lead. And our last goal is that you can identify how you can really integrate coaching into your current work. So this program is divided into 3 parts. So let's get started with part 1. We'll be looking at workforce trends and workforce expectations. As I tape this program, we have a healthcare delivery system that's really in crisis with the COVID-19 pandemic. And what you're seeing on the front lines during care during this pandemic is really, I would say, unprecedented. The patients are very sick. There are shortages of protective equipment and ventilators. And many hospitals, frankly, don't have enough staff, which kind of adds to the challenge. This crisis is very likely to reshape both nursing and healthcare in many ways. And we don't know exactly yet what they will be, but I think we're going to see some major changes as an outcome of this. But even before the pandemic started, our nurses were really feeling stressed and burned out. And there have been two major white papers that have been published in the past couple of years. One was from the National Institute of Health, looking at providing a framework for joy in work. And the second one was from the National Academy of Medicine that was just published in December of 2019, taking action against clinician burnout. And both of these white papers really address the challenges of asking staff to care for patients when they themselves are really not doing self-care. So that's a topic that we'll be talking a lot more about in the program on coaching for resiliency. But even before the pandemic hit, there were also many dramatic changes happening in our healthcare environments. During the past decade, as an example, we've really seen a huge decline in community-based hospitals and really the emergence of very large hospital systems, which some of you may work for. We've also seen some new companies enter the healthcare delivery space, such as Amazon and Apple, as competition for healthcare dollars really grows. We're also seeing the development of some really new approaches to the delivery of healthcare. And one of them is this Project Haven, which joins Amazon, JP Chase Morgan, and Berkshire Hathaway in a self-coverage program for their own employees. And we also see a very large company, Walmart, moving really beyond the minute clinic space, which they've been involved in for a number of years, to designing centers where they're able to see primary care patients, dental patients, and even behavioral health. So these disruptions not only impact our healthcare delivery system, but something that I'd just like you to be aware of is they also add a lot of employment opportunities for our traditional nursing workforce. So our competition is now coming in many places. As we move into 2020, we're seeing really dramatic changes in our nursing workforce, some of which are really proving very challenging for nurse leaders. We currently have four generations in the workforce. The baby boomers, who once comprised really the largest generational cohort in nursing, are aging, and 10,000 baby boomers are actually turning 65 each day. Many of these baby boomer nurses are retiring, and they're taking with them not only their vast amount of clinical knowledge, but also their organizational know-how as well. Most of our current nurse leaders at this point in time are members of Generation X, but as they will probably quickly tell you, is that they're becoming outnumbered by millennials that are now more than half our workforce in many health systems. Uh, our youngest generation in the workforce is Generation Z, and they're just really starting to come into the workforce and beginning their careers. And so little has been written about this generation that we thought it was important to devote one of our programs to really looking at Generation Z. So we'll be doing this. So really, as an outcome of these generational changes, nurse leaders today are finding themselves with staffing challenges. And this was even before the coronavirus. Patient acuity is rising. Patients today, if they're hospitalized, are usually extremely sick, and it's not unusual for them to have two or three chronic illnesses in addition to their admission diagnosis. With the retirement of so many baby boomer nurses, particularly in some settings, it's happened pretty quickly. There really has become an experience complexity gap. Ideally, if we were looking at a staff on a unit, we'd like to see the majority of our staff with 3 years or more experience, and that would be really ideal. But for many hospitals at this point in time, that's really not been doable. And they may have units that are primarily staffed by novice nurses who really need extensive coaching. We're also seeing shorter employment tenures as nurses both move around to different specialties, return to graduate school, and just seek more career opportunities. So nationally, nurse turnover is on the rise. It was over 17% in 2019. And this turnover comes at a very high cost because you can look at this slide and see that the average cost of replacing an RN runs about $52,000. And that's just average. It could be double than that in a specialty area like perioperative nursing. Now, as you can imagine, for the average hospital, this could mean that as much as $7 million of their operating costs each year are just spent on replacing staff. So big budget there. The highest turnover in nursing continues to be in the first 2 years of practice, and almost 37% of our new graduates leave their first employers within 2 years. Now, you're probably thinking, why now? What's happening with our newest generations of nursing that's really leading to the type of turnover that we've been seeing? And a key factor that has really been identified is that what these two generations expect from their leaders is very different. It's very different than it was for the baby boomers who worked for and really accepted the behaviors of more traditional leaders who operated using more of a command and control style of leadership. Today, both our millennial and our Generation Z nurses want their leaders to be more coach-like. And when they're not, these nurses are very likely to leave their employers. So you can see the differences between, on this slide, we look at some of the differences between millennials and Generation Z. But some of the similarities are that both groups really want this career coaching, and they want coaching and feedback. So perspectives about work are also shifting. There's much less concern for how do I fit into your organization, and much more concern on the part of our staff as to how does the organization really fit into my life. And I think that if you look at what our younger generations are really wanting, you'll find that it's really all about accommodation and flexibility. So if you as a leader today are not attentive to these kinds of concerns, you may find yourself with a really high turnover rate among your staff. Now, the changes in terms of what the workforce wants were really nicely laid out in a book by the Gallup Corporation in 2019. And what Gallup did was they drew upon all of their research around the workplace, they do studies involving satisfaction, engagement, and a number of different dimensions. And they found that employee expectations were definitely changing. And one big one is highlighted in red on this slide, and that is that younger generations really want their bosses to be coaches. They want much more frequent feedback about how they're doing than did either Generation X or the baby boomers. Sometimes we lead, and this is true of all leaders, sometimes we lead using a style that we ourselves prefer. And if you're a baby boomer, if you're a Generation X leader, this could be a mistake, because what the millennials and Gen Zs want is really something different. And to be successful in our roles, it's really us as the leaders that need to change. So whenever you're asked to make a behavioral change, it's really, it's logical and right to ask the question, why should I do this? What does the return on investment look like for me as a leader if I make this change in my practice? And I think there's really four key areas that you could see better outcomes if you become a leader coach. The first is involves staff empowerment and engagement, because what we know is that coaching leads to higher levels of empowerment. That we know from the research. Frequent coaching also can improve communication in your organization, because it really focuses coaching focuses more on two-way communication, which is so important in terms of the communication stream. Good coaching can also lead to higher levels of both staff retention and satisfaction when you become the boss that no one wants to leave. And leader coaching also can lead to the creation of a much healthier work environment. Now that we've looked at why coaching matters, in part two, we're really going to focus on the differences between the traditional leader and the leader coach. We'll also discuss how can you go about developing a coaching mindset. Like any new skill, you should see coaching as something that you can add to your leadership toolbox. And I think that's a good way of looking at coaching. It's another tool in your leadership toolbox. But what's important about this is that it won't come without intention on your part and without practice. It's not something that's going to be automatic. Now, some of you may be saying to yourself, um, I do this already. And you may, in fact, believe that you do. But what we know from research is that while many leaders think they are good coaches, when they're actually observed in situations where researchers have a chance to do observational research, their behaviors really aren't coaching behaviors. What they are essentially solving staff problems and telling staff what to do. Now, the good news about coaching is that coaching can be learned with practice. So, this is something that's definitely doable. Now, the definition that we will use for coaching in this series is from Sir John Whitmore, whose work is really well known in the coaching world. And Whitmore describes coaching as unlocking the potential of another to help them really maximize their performance. It is helping them to learn, and this is key, helping them to learn instead of teaching them. This can be very challenging for nurse leaders. Most of you, I would guess, were selected for your role because you have great problem solving skills. And this is really how you have learned to add value. So it's pretty natural that when you come into a leadership role, you want to continue doing this. But there's a problem with doing that. The problem is that it's not how staff learn and grow. If you're a leader who finds yourself being constantly interrupted by staff coming into your office with questions, it might be that you're so immersed in the problem solving mode rather than having staff solve their own problems, that it really becomes a challenge for you to even get all of your own work done. So to be successful, a successful nurse leader coach, you really do need to commit yourself to making a transition. Now you can see that this slide kind of outlines what the differences are between a traditional manager and a leader coach. A leader coach doesn't just focus on performance. Leader coaches also realize that it's very important to their staff to focus on their professional growth as well. A leader coach also looks at feedback in a little different way. Whereas a traditional management philosophy might be no news is good news, you only provide feedback if it's needed. The leader coach realizes that much more frequent feedback is needed, particularly by younger staff. And then as a leader coach, you need to be more strengths focused and less focused on weaknesses. It doesn't mean that you don't work with staff to correct their weaknesses, but that shouldn't be the total focus. You should come from more of a strengths-based approach. And finally, the kinds of questions that you think about and ask yourself are different when you're a leader coach. Rather than ask, what can I do for you? the coach would ask, what can we do together? Because this is all about partnership when you're working as a coach. Now, nurse leader coaches also need to both personally demonstrate a growth mindset and infuse that in staff as well. Now, Carol Dweck is a professor at Stanford University, and she's written she's done a lot of research and written about the importance of this idea about a fixed versus a growth mindset. We know that so many people have fixed mindsets about themselves or self-limiting beliefs. And when they have this type of mindset, they give up pretty easily, and they also fear failure. Now, a great leader coach kind of pushes us to take risks. So you can only take these risks if you have a growth mindset. And so, it's not only the nurse that you coach that needs a growth mindset. It's you as a leader have to believe that that person is going to be able to do and grow and learn as well. So, in order to be an effective nurse leader coach, you will need to integrate coaching into your leadership mindset. It is something that you're always doing with staff. This isn't just coaching, is not a one and done activity. This is important. It really is something that you really integrate in your leadership and you do all the time. Now, there are some of you, I am quite sure that this will come very, very naturally to, but there's others out there that are going to have to work a lot harder to be able to do this. So, as we look at part three, one of the questions that I often hear from leaders in workshops involves finding time to coach. As one leader told me, I have 80 staff on my unit. How can I possibly find the time to do this? There's not enough time in the day, there's not enough time in the month or even the year. And from one perspective, she's absolutely right about this. Time really is a challenge for many nurse leaders. And if you had to do this all by yourself, you probably couldn't. But the idea is that every leader on the unit, and this would include your assistant nurse managers, it would include your charge nurses, every leader on your unit would have a coaching mindset so that you could create a coaching culture. You would not be the only one, the only leader on the unit that would be doing this. So in this final section, we'll just briefly talk about how can you integrate coaching into your current workflow, and then we'll outline some next steps for you. So you can see that there really are 4 steps to integrating coaching into your workload, into your work. The first step is to just get started. It means that you're going to commit yourself that you do want to do more coaching in your leadership. And even if it's just small incremental steps, that you commit yourself to doing this. Now, what we know from from much work on the whole idea of habits is that really our work practices are habits as well. So you want to think about coaching as a habit that you can integrate into your leadership, but something that you need to be intentional about, and also something that you need to practice. A second step is to look at how much current coaching are you really currently doing. It might be very little. Some leaders tell me they do almost none, to be honest, and others say that they really do quite a bit. So be honest in really asking yourself as as you watch the next video about coaching basics, how much of this am I doing right now? The third step is to look at your current activities where you are interfacing with your staff, because these are good places to start with coaching. So ones that I would encourage you to really take a look at is look at things like the shift huddles, look at things like your leadership rounds, look at things like the staff meetings. These would be opportunities that these are activities that you're already doing in your leadership practice that you could just take the time and build some coaching into those activities. And the last step would be to plan for 3 to 4 interactions with staff, maybe on a daily basis, where you can practice the coaching skills that we review in the series. You know, what I've learned from leaders, and it's probably the best reason to even implement coaching, is what I have learned from my work with leaders is that when I ask them, you know, what do you love most about what you do? What they will usually tell me is that coaching staff is the best part of their job. This is something I think if you learn to do it, you're going to enjoy your own work more. Now that you have watched this first program in the series, I'd like to remind you that it's one of 10. And so I'd strongly encourage you to watch the second program, which is on the basics, and then move from there to our other programs, which can be watched in no particular order. And the other thing that you can do with these videos that can be very helpful is that they'll be available. So let's say you do run into a situation where you're coaching someone with a difficult personality, that you can take the time to, maybe they're short videos, just watch the video again to give you some ideas about how to deal with the situation. Now, to close, I just like to encourage you. You're just getting kind of a brief overview of nurse leader coaching. I'd like to encourage you to really consider bringing the Nurse Leader Coach Workshop on site for your leaders and your emerging leaders. We can do the workshops for up to 50 staff in an all-day session. It's really, I think, a pretty affordable way to provide a unique highly interactive leadership development experience for your staff. And we have a lot of references from places that we've done this that you can really talk with. We've done it in health systems throughout the country. Um, One of the advantages is, as part of this, I do a pre-assessment, an online pre-assessment of your leadership team, to really look at what their unique coaching challenges are right now. And I also personally interview 5 to 10 of your frontline leaders, so that when we develop scenarios that we use within the workshop, that they're scenarios and content that is really meaningful. So if you are interested in doing that, I would encourage you to contact me for more information. And thank you so much for watching the program.